The stars had never looked more beautiful, yet humanity felt the weight of impending doom. The Zorathians had arrived like a storm from the dark void of space. Their ships glided silently through the blackened sky, each one a harbinger of destruction. Humanity had heard the rumors of the Zorathians for years, but nothing could have prepared them for the overwhelming power of their fleet. When the first wave of Zorathian ships entered the solar system, they obliterated the outer colonies. Without hesitation, their weapons were far beyond anything humanity had seen, and their tactics were ruthless. The cities of Mars were vaporized in seconds, while the population of Europa was extinguished without mercy. The rest of humanity had no choice but to fall back to Earth, the last bastion of hope. With the Zorathians approaching, the planet's defenses were quickly put to the test. The military had been preparing for years, but even the most advanced human technology seemed laughable in comparison to the alien might that loomed overhead. The first wave of assaults began, and humanity was forced to fight for every inch of ground, every building, every street. It was a desperate defense, but the Zorathians were relentless. Their battle tactics were as efficient as they were merciless. No one had expected such an overwhelming assault. Humanity's last hope was the planet itself. The idea of Earth being the final stand was not one that any human had taken lightly, but it was all they had left. Inside the war rooms of Earth's command centers, generals and strategists worked tirelessly to develop countermeasures, but it was clear that without outside help, Earth stood little chance. The Zorathians had been a threat for centuries. They had wiped out countless species, and now they were here at the doorstep of humanity's home. The stakes had never been higher. Humanity had always prided itself on being resourceful, on fighting with everything it had, but facing an enemy this powerful forced them to confront a harsh reality. Their greatest strength was not their weapons, it was their ability to adapt and think on their feet. But even that seemed insufficient against such an advanced foe. In the midst of this crisis, Captain Alizia Rayner stood at the heart of the command center, staring out at the screens as reports of the damage filtered in. There was no time to waste. Every second counted. The war had only just begun, and already the human resistance was being pushed to the brink. The Zorathians knew no mercy and showed no weakness. Their forces seemed infinite, and with each passing moment humanity lost more of its ground. But Captain Rayner refused to believe they were doomed. She knew the human spirit was unyielding. They had faced extinction before and survived. They could do it again. The first counterattack came as a surprise. Humanity had developed new weapons in secret over the years, just in case they were ever faced with an enemy like the Zorathians. These were not just weapons of destruction, they were designed to outthink and outmaneuver any foe, but they had never been tested on such a scale. The human fleet, despite being vastly outnumbered, launched a coordinated assault against the approaching Zorathian warships. Humanity had no illusions about their chances, but every battle was an opportunity to learn, to adapt, and to survive. As the first battle raged on, humanity learned something new, something unexpected. The Zorathians, for all their power and advanced technology, underestimated the human capacity for innovation. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future. And they would never surrender so long as a single human remained to fight. The fate of the galaxy had just been altered. Humanity had proven that it could withstand the storm. And now the real battle had begun. The first victory in the war against the Zorathians was small yet significant. The human fleet had managed to disable a Zorathian cruiser in a surprise attack, but it was enough to send a ripple of hope through the ranks. It proved that the Zorathians were not invincible, and humanity still had a chance. In the darkest hours of the conflict, unexpected events began to unfold. Humanity's desperate fight caught the attention of other oppressed races in the galaxy. Races that had been under Zorathian control for centuries. They had watched as the Zorathians expanded their empire with unchecked cruelty, and had long given up hope of ever resisting. But humanity's fight had sparked something in them, something they hadn't felt in generations. Hope. The first to reach out were the Altri, the insectoid species that lived on the fringes of the galaxy. Their planet had been raided and enslaved by the Zorathians for years, but they had retained a bitter pride in their ability to survive. Their ambassador, a towering figure named Vorath, made the first move in secret. he sent a coded message to Earth, a message that would change the course of the war forever. Captain Alicia Rayner sat in her command room, the screens flashing with reports of battles lost and won. The Zorathians were ruthless, but she could sense something was shifting. The Altri ambassador had offered assistance in the form of intelligence and technology. Their ships, though crude compared to Zorathian craft, were fast and agile, perfect for hit-and-run tactics against the larger enemy fleets. Humanity had never relied on such methods before, but necessity breeds innovation, and Captain Rayner quickly saw the potential. With the help of the Altri, the humans were able to disrupt Zorathian supply lines and strike from unexpected angles, leaving the enemy scrambling to respond. It was the beginning of a new strategy that humanity had never considered before: guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. The Zorathians were frustrated by these new tactics and began to view humanity's resistance as more than just a nuisance, but as a true threat. The sight of human forces working alongside alien species sent a powerful message throughout the galaxy. Humanity was no longer fighting alone. They had become the rallying point for every enslaved race that had once been silent in the face of tyranny. But the Altri were just the beginning. Soon others followed. The Saurians, a reptilian race that had been subjugated for decades, joined the cause, followed by the Velvori, a race of telepathic beings whose world had been shattered by Zorathian cruelty. The more species that rallied to humanity's side, the more desperate the Zorathians became. Alicia Rayner knew that their newfound alliances were fragile at best. The races that had joined them were often as distrustful of each other as they were of the Zorathians, but they shared one common enemy, and that was enough for now. The war was still young, but humanity's influence had already begun to spread across the galaxy. Their enemies were no longer just the Zorathians. They were now up against the combined force of all the enslaved species who had once been content to cower under Zorathian rule. And now they were united under one banner, the banner of humanity's resilience. However, there was still one crucial problem that humanity had yet to solve. The Zorathian fleets still vastly outnumbered their combined forces, and the alien technology humanity had managed to acquire was still no match for the power of the Zorathian warships. Captain Rayner was under no illusion that these alliances would be enough to win the war outright. They needed more time, more resources, and more intelligence on how to defeat the Zorathian war machine for good. The real test of humanity's strength would come when they faced the Zorathian fleet head-on in a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. But for now, humanity had something it had never had before: hope. And with that hope came the spark of something greater, the realization that together they could stand against even the mightiest of empires. The first true clash between humanity's coalition and the Zorathian Empire erupted at the outer rim of the galaxy, where the final remnants of humanity's fleet had gathered to make their stand against an approaching Zorathian armada. The warships of humanity's allies were still crude compared to the Zorathian behemoths, but they fought with an intensity that surprised their enemies. The battle began with a series of skirmishes as the combined fleet of humans and their new alien allies used hit-and-run tactics to whittle down the Zorathian forces. It was a strategy that had worked on a small scale, but now they were forced to confront the full might of the Zorathian Empire, and the outcome was uncertain. The skies above the battlefield filled with fire and fury as human and alien ships weaved through the stars, dodging enemy fire and retaliating with everything they had. Captain Alicia Rayner stood at the command center of the human flagship, her eyes never leaving the battle map as it flickered with the movements of friend and foe alike. The Zorathian fleet was massive and well-coordinated, but there was something about the way humanity fought that made them unpredictable. The humans used every advantage at their disposal. Their ships were equipped with hybrid technology, combining alien systems with human ingenuity. They had learned to adapt on the fly to new tactics and techniques never before seen by the Zorathians. It was that adaptability that gave them an edge they would never have had if they had tried to fight with sheer numbers. The Zorathians underestimated the humans at their own peril. They had expected humanity to be weak and disorganized. But they were wrong. The humans were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for their freedom and the freedom of every enslaved race they had liberated. With each engagement, humanity's forces grew bolder, pushing deeper into the heart of Zorathian territory. While the Zorathian fleet seemed to falter and lose cohesion for the first time since the war began, the Zorathians were not so sure of their victory. As the battle raged on, Elysia watched the data streams on her console, her thoughts racing through possible strategies. She had trained for years to lead in such moments, but now everything she had learned was being tested. She knew the Zorathians had a weakness: their overconfidence and their belief that no species could rise against them. For long, the humans had already proven that they could push the boundaries of what was possible. They just had to keep pressing forward while the enemy was still reeling. The humans and their allies launched a daring attack on the Zorathian flagship. The flagship was heavily protected, but the coalition's fighters were relentless. They had learned to work together with perfect precision, combining their unique strengths into an unstoppable force. It was a battle that would determine the fate of the entire galaxy, but humanity had something the Zorathians didn't: a fire within them that refused to be extinguished. No matter how many lives were lost or how many battles were fought, humanity would not bow to any empire. The Zorathian flagship shook under the relentless assault of human and alien weapons. The crew aboard it scrambled to defend their position, but the humans had already infiltrated their defenses with expert precision. The ship's engines sputtered and faltered as the coalition fighters closed in for the kill. It was then that Captain Rayner made her move, launching a final barrage of fire that crippled the Zorathian flagship and sent it into a spiral of destruction. As the massive vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the humans and their allies celebrated their first major victory over the Zorathian Empire. But the battle was far from over. The Zorathians would not give up easily, and the war was only just beginning. Humanity's victory at this moment was a symbol of their strength and their resolve, but the real test would come when they faced the full might of the Zorathian forces, and no one knew what the future would hold. The victory at the Zorathian flagship had been a turning point, but humanity knew it was not enough to win the war. They had only scratched the surface of what the Zorathians were capable of. Captain Elysia Rayner sat in the quiet war room, watching the reports pour in. The coalition forces had done well, but they were still vastly outnumbered. They needed something more, something that could change the balance of the war in their favor. And that's when they discovered it deep within the caverns of the Earth's surface, a long-forgotten relic of an ancient civilization that had once thrived on the planet. Before the rise of humanity, this artifact had been hidden away for millennia, its purpose and origins lost to time. But its potential was clear when a group of human archaeologists unearthed it and brought it to the command center. The scientists who examined it could barely comprehend the scale of its power. The artifact was unlike anything humanity had ever seen: a crystalline structure pulsating with energy. It was a weapon that could turn the tide of the entire war. Humanity's scientists began to study the artifact with urgency. They worked day and night to understand how it could be activated and how to harness its power for their war effort. What they discovered was nothing short of astonishing. The artifact was a source of limitless energy capable of amplifying human technology to unimaginable levels. With this power, humanity could create weapons and shields far beyond anything the Zorathians had ever encountered. It was a breakthrough that no one had anticipated, and it gave humanity the edge they so desperately needed. As the artifact was integrated into human ships and weapons, the results were immediate. The new energy sources allowed for faster engines, more powerful weapons and shields that could withstand even the heaviest Zorathian firepower. The first test came when a small group of coalition ships equipped with the new technology faced off against the Zorathian assault fleet. The battle was swift and decisive. The new weapons tore through the Zorathian ships like paper, and within hours the Zorathian fleet was in full retreat. Humanity's new weapon had changed the game entirely. But the Zorathians were not blind to the shift in power. They realized quickly that their dominance in the galaxy was being threatened by this new human technology, and they reacted with fury. They began to escalate their attacks on Earth and its allies, launching wave after wave of ships toward the planet, hoping to crush humanity's newfound strength before it could take full effect. But the humans were ready. They had no intention of letting the Zorathians win now. that they had a weapon capable of fighting back on equal terms. Captain Rayner watched as the first true test of the artifact's power unfolded before her eyes. The battle began with the Zorathians launching a massive assault on Earth's atmosphere, hoping to weaken the defenses of the planet's surface. But the humans stood their ground. The new human fleet met the enemy head-on, using the advanced energy weapons to cut down the Zorathian ships. One by one, as each wave of invaders fell to the new weapons, it became clear that humanity had the advantage. As the battle raged on, the Zorathians began to realize that they were fighting a different kind of enemy. This was not the broken and defeated species they had once encountered. Humanity was a force unlike any they had ever seen, and they were determined to see their homeworld survive. They would fight until the last ship fell, and the Zorathians would soon learn that humanity's spirit could not be crushed so easily. But even with the new technology, humanity was still facing the largest challenge of their existence. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Zorathians would regroup and come at them with even more ferocity, and their enemies were still numerous. The real question was not whether humanity could defend itself, but whether it could outsmart the Zorathians at every turn and turn the tide in their favor. The victory had been swift but fleeting. The Zorathian retreat was not the end of their war plans, it was merely the beginning of a new phase. The Zorathian fleet regrouped in the farthest reaches of their territory, where they began to rebuild and rearm, preparing for the inevitable counterattack. They knew humanity had discovered something new, something that could change everything, and they were determined to crush it before it could fully be used against them. The Zorathians had never been known for their mercy, and now that humanity was beginning to fight back with a weapon that could level the playing field, they would stop at nothing to destroy it. Captain Elysia Rayner stood before the massive holographic war map in Earth's command center. The mood was tense. The Zorathians were reassembling their fleets in secret, but they would not be caught off guard this time. Humanity had learned how to anticipate their movements and had begun fortifying the entire solar system. They would not let the Zorathians take another step toward Earth without a fight. But Rayner knew that they could not just hold their ground. They needed to strike first. They needed to take the battle to the Zorathians before their enemies were ready to launch another wave of destruction. The human fleet had grown stronger with the integration of the alien technologies and the artifact's power, but they had yet to truly test it on a large scale. The warships now had shields that could withstand almost any assault and weapons that could turn even the largest Zorathian battleships into debris in an instant. But the Zorathians had always been unpredictable, and Rayner knew they were planning something more than just another invasion. The first sign of the Zorathian counterattack came when the outer colonies began receiving distress signals. They were under siege. The Zorathian ships had come in force, and their weapons had evolved. The Zorathians had learned quickly from their earlier defeat and were adapting in real time. Their new tactics were far more aggressive, and their weaponry was far deadlier. The Zorathians had developed new energy weapons that could pierce through the human shields and firepower that was designed to bypass humanity's newfound technology. The battle would not be as simple as before, and humanity's defenses would be tested to their limit. Rayner gathered her commanders together for an emergency meeting. The Zorathians had struck first, but humanity could not afford to wait any longer. They had to strike back quickly. They could no longer afford to play defensively. The new human weapons were their only hope, but they were not invincible. There were still too many variables and too many unknowns. Rayner made the call. They would take the fight directly to the Zorathians. Before they could solidify their power again, she ordered the fleet to prepare for a full-scale offensive. They would fight to win or die, trying. The fate of humanity depended on it. The Zorathians had underestimated humanity before, but they would not make that mistake again. This time humanity was no longer a fractured species struggling for survival. They were a united force with the power to push back the darkness that threatened to engulf them. Their alien allies stood with them, but it was the human spirit that would carry them through the coming storm. The first wave of human ships left Earth's orbit and headed for the heart of Zorathian territory. Their mission was simple: find the Zorathian command center and destroy it. If they could cripple the Zorathian leadership, then they would be able to turn the tide in their favor. But the Zorathians were prepared for the assault, and their defenses were stronger than ever. The battle began with fierce resistance. The human ships fought through waves of Zorathian fighters and warships, determined to break through and reach the command center. But the Zorathian fleet was vast, and every turn seemed to bring more enemies into the fray. The humans were stretched thin, but they pushed forward, refusing to give an inch. They would not falter in the face of adversity, and with every shot they fired, they reminded the galaxy that humanity was no longer a species to be ignored or underestimated. The battle raged on across the stars. Humanity's fleet had pierced deep into Zorathian-controlled space. But the further they pushed, the more the Zorathians fought back with renewed fury. The Zorathian command center remained a distant target, surrounded by layers of defenses that seemed impenetrable. Humanity's ships fought through waves of Zorathian fighters, but they could not seem to break through to the heart of their enemy's stronghold. Captain Aliza Reyna stood at the helm of the human flagship, the Valkyrie. Her hands gripped the command chair as explosions rocked the ship's outer hull. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship operational, but the Zorathians were relentless, their attacks becoming more focused, more precise. The humans had dealt a heavy blow to the Zorathian fleet, but now they were finding it harder to maintain their momentum. Reyna knew they had to make a choice. They could not keep fighting in this way. They were losing more ships with every passing minute, and they had not yet reached their target. Their new weapons had proved effective, but they could not fight off the overwhelming numbers of Zorathian warships. Without support, the humans had pushed forward with everything they had, but the Zorathians were adapting faster than anticipated. Their weapons had evolved, and their tactics had shifted. They were no longer underestimating humanity. They were taking the fight to them in ways the humans had not anticipated. The time for a different strategy had come. Reyna called an emergency meeting with her command staff and their alien allies. The battle against the Zorathians was no longer one of brute force. It was one of strategy, of deception and misdirection. They needed to draw the Zorathians out of their stronghold and into a trap where they could unleash the full power of humanity's new weapons. If they could create a distraction large enough, they might be able to penetrate the defenses and reach the Zorathian command center, but it would require every ounce of cunning they had. The plan was risky, and it relied on perfect timing, but it was humanity's best shot at dealing a decisive blow to the Zorathian Empire. Reyna's mind raced as she formulated the details. They would feign retreat, pulling a small portion of the fleet back to Earth, while sending the rest of the ships to strike a nearby Zorathian supply base. The goal was simple: make the Zorathians believe that the humans were abandoning their offensive, so they would pull back their forces to defend their supply line. But in reality, the humans would be luring the enemy into a trap. Once the Zorathians were drawn out, the full force of humanity's fleet would be ready to strike. The trap was set, and the bait was taken. The Zorathians, ever eager to exploit humanity's apparent weakness, began to pull their forces back from the command center and focus on the supply base. The human ships retreated as planned, drawing the enemy in closer. But just as the Zorathians believed they had won the upper hand, the human fleet emerged from the shadows, launching a full-scale attack on the Zorathian command center. The ensuing battle was chaotic, but the humans had the advantage of surprise. Their new energy weapons cut through Zorathian ships with devastating force, and their fleets now moved with deadly precision. The Zorathians were caught off guard, and their leadership scrambled to respond as the human ships breached their outer defenses. The final push had begun. Reyna watched as her fleet tore through the remaining Zorathian forces. The command center was now within reach. The Zorathians, now realizing their mistake, fought desperately to defend their home base. But the humans had learned too much. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for victory. Humanity's spirit could not be extinguished, and with each moment, the Zorathians were losing their grip on the galaxy. As the battle unfolded, Reyna could see the end in sight. The Zorathians had been outwitted, outmaneuvered, and overwhelmed. Their empire was beginning to crumble under the weight of humanity's resolve. The war was not yet won, but the tide had shifted forever. The human fleet pushed deeper into the heart of Zorathian territory. The battle for their command center was raging with all the intensity humanity could muster, But the Zorathians had not given up. They had one final trick to play. Their defenses were crumbling under the pressure of the human assault, but they had activated their last line of defense, an enormous ship that dwarfed anything humanity had faced before. The Zorathian behemoth, known as the Reaper class, was a monstrous creation capable of withstanding the most concentrated fire and delivering catastrophic destruction. In return, humanity's forces had never seen anything like it, and the pressure of facing this new threat weighed heavily on them. Captain Elisa Rayner felt the tension in her bones as she watched the Reaper-class ship come into view. It was a wall of metal and energy, unlike anything she had ever encountered. The Zorathians had thrown everything they had into this final defense. The Reaper class was equipped with shields that absorbed energy and converted it into massive offensive blasts that could level entire fleets in a single shot. Rayner knew this battle would test humanity's resolve in ways they had never imagined. Their ships were powerful, but they were not invincible, and the Zorathian behemoth had the potential to end their campaign in a single strike. Rayner had no choice but to act decisively. She ordered her fleet to move in formation, creating a perimeter around the Reaper class and launching everything they had at it. Their weapons fired in coordinated bursts, hoping to weaken the ship's shields. But it was like punching a wall. The Reaper class absorbed the fire and sent back blasts of its own. Each explosion rocked the battlefield. But the humans refused to retreat. They had come too far to turn back now. Rayner knew that their current tactics wouldn't be enough. The Reaper class was far too resilient, and the human fleet was beginning to lose cohesion. Under its relentless assault, she needed a new plan, a way to exploit the behemoth's weaknesses. The human ships were nimble and fast, but they couldn't break through the Reaper class's shields without a better strategy. The key was not to overpower it, but to outsmart it. She quickly realized that the Reaper class was not invincible. It was powered by a central core that could be accessed only through one narrow corridor, a small weakness in an otherwise indestructible design. If the humans could get one of their ships close enough to the core, they could plant a device that would cause a critical system failure that would take the behemoth down. But the risk was enormous. It would mean sending a ship into the heart of the Zorathian war machine, where every gun and missile would be trained on it. Rayner called for volunteers to make the dangerous run. The mission was too critical to leave to anyone else, and only a few officers were brave enough to answer the call. One of them was Lieutenant Joran Talbot, a seasoned pilot with nerves of steel who had seen his fair share of battles. He was chosen to lead the charge. His ship would be the one to make the final attempt to destroy the Reaper class. The plan was set, and Talbot's ship, the Raven, would race through the Zorathian defenses and target the core. If he succeeded, the war would be over for the Zorathians, but if he failed, humanity's fleet would be wiped out. As Talbot's ship took off with full speed, Rayner's heart raced. She watched from the flagship's command center as the Raven darted through enemy fire at impossible speeds, weaving and dodging in ways that seemed almost reckless. But it was the only chance humanity had. The Raven's course was set. It was a one-way trip, and the Zorathian firepower was unforgiving. Talbot had no room for error. Every second counted as he flew closer to the Reaper class's heart. The Zorathians tried to cut him off, but Talbot was faster. His ship was a blur, darting through the onslaught of enemy missiles and plasma beams. He reached the heart of the Reaper class. The shields around the core flickered with energy. But it wasn't enough. The Raven's small size allowed it to slip through the cracks and get close enough for Talbot to plant the device. With a final burst of energy, the device activated just as the Reaper class fired its last salvo. The explosion was massive. A chain reaction of power and energy tore through the heart of the Zorathian warship. The massive behemoth's shields faltered, and the ship crumbled into oblivion. The human fleet watched in awe as the Zorathian Reaper class collapsed into dust and debris. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Zorathian Empire and won the day. But the war was not over yet. The Zorathians would not surrender easily, but now humanity knew that they could fight back and survive. They had shattered the most powerful weapon in the Zorathian arsenal, and with that victory came the promise that they could win this war. With the destruction of the Reaper-class ship, The humans felt a surge of hope, but they knew this victory had not yet secured their freedom. The Zorathians had always been resilient, and their military was vast. They had lost one of their most powerful weapons, but their army was still formidable. Captain Alizia Rayner stood at the helm of the Valkyrie, looking out at the aftermath of the battle. Their forces had struck hard, but the war was far from over. The Zorathians would not give up without a fight. Their fleet was still large, and their forces were regrouping across the galaxy. They would have to finish what they started and take the war to the very heart of Zorathian space if they were to truly end the conflict and ensure humanity's future. Rayna's mind raced as she considered the next move. The artifact's power had given them an edge, but they had to keep pressing forward. The Zorathian Empire had to be toppled completely for humanity to be free. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would push into Zorathian core worlds and dismantle their command structures. One by one, their target was not just a military victory, but a psychological one. They needed to break the will of the Zorathians once and for all, to show them that humanity would not be broken no matter how strong or how many the Zorathians were. The new strategy involved a series of precision strikes on Zorathian command centers across several systems. Their goal was to cripple the enemy's ability to coordinate their fleets and disrupt their supply chains. Without a centralized command, the Zorathians would struggle to fight back. But it would require every ounce of humanity's strength to succeed. Each strike would need to be swift and devastating. The human fleet had to strike first every time before the Zorathians could regroup and retaliate. Rayna addressed the fleet commanders. The plan was risky and would involve cutting their forces into smaller strike groups, each tasked with a different target. They would have to rely on speed and surprise to succeed. They would strike fast and vanish before the Zorathians could react. Their targets were already identified, key command stations scattered across the Zorathian heartland, but the risks were enormous. Splitting the fleet meant they would be more vulnerable, but it was the only way to ensure they hit the enemy where it hurt the most. As the fleet split into smaller units, the tension in the command center grew palpable. Rayna watched the radar screens as her ship led a group of 5 others toward their target, a Zorathian command station located on the third moon of a gas giant deep within enemy territory. The journey would take them through a series of heavily fortified Zorathian defenses, but they had no choice. They had to keep moving. The longer they stayed in one place, the more time the Zorathians would have to mount a counterattack. The flight was tense, each ship maneuvering through asteroid fields and debris clusters. To avoid detection, they were far from home, and the Zorathian presence was everywhere. Their sensors were constantly on the lookout for any sign of human ships. But the humans were prepared. They had developed new stealth technologies to evade detection, and their speed allowed them to slip past enemy patrols undetected. As the small fleet neared their target, the Zorathian defenses began to respond. Their warships moved into position as if they knew the humans were coming. But it was too late. The humans launched a surprise assault on the command station's exterior with precision. The human ships moved in waves, firing energy beams and missiles with unrelenting force. The Zorathians fought back fiercely, but the human ships had the advantage of coordination and speed. Their shields held, and their weapons cut through the Zorathian defenses like a knife through butter. The command station was in chaos as the human fleet tore through it. The Zorathians tried to regroup, but they were overwhelmed. Their centralized control was crumbling, and soon the station was a burning wreck. The human fleet pulled back as quickly as they had attacked, leaving the Zorathians stunned and disoriented. Rayna's ship and the others made their way to the next target. The same strategy repeated itself as the humans struck at Zorathian command centers across multiple systems, each attack crippling the Zorathians' ability to fight back with any real coordination. The Zorathians were losing control. Their fleets were scattering, and their once mighty empire was beginning to unravel. But just as the humans began to feel they were gaining the upper hand, the Zorathians launched their final counterattack. In a desperate attempt to stop them, they gathered all their remaining forces into one final offensive, a last-ditch effort to destroy the human fleet. Before it could complete its mission, the Zorathians knew they had nothing left to lose, and they were willing to throw everything into this final strike. Reyna could feel the pressure mounting as the human ships prepared for the ultimate clash. They had crippled the Zorathian command structures, but the final battle would determine whether humanity's newfound strength would be enough to crush the Zorathian Empire for good. The war was not over yet, but the end was drawing near. The atmosphere was thick with tension as humanity's fleet gathered for the final assault. Their victory had been hard-earned, but the war was far from over. The Zorathians had gathered their remaining forces into one massive fleet, their last attempt to push humanity back and reclaim their dominance in the galaxy. Alicia Reyna stood at the command center of the Valkyrie, looking out at the vast armada that had assembled before them. It was a sight that would have sent shivers down the spine of any other commander. But not her. She had seen humanity rise from the brink of extinction, and she knew they were ready for this final confrontation. They had come too far to back down now. The Zorathian fleet was enormous, a wall of ships that seemed to stretch into infinity. But Reyna knew that this would be their last stand. If they could defeat the Zorathians here, and now they would break the Empire once and for all. The human fleet was outnumbered, but they had something the Zorathians did not. They had unity and the will to fight for survival. Reyna's mind raced as she considered their strategy. Their ships were smaller, faster, and more maneuverable than the Zorathian behemoths. But the enemy had more firepower and a sheer number advantage. The plan was simple: strike hard and fast, hit the Zorathians where it hurt, and make them question their ability to win this war. Reyna issued the order to launch, and the human fleet surged forward into the heart of the Zorathian stronghold. With a roar of engines and the flash of weapons, the battle erupted in a blow of energy and explosions. The human ships fired with deadly accuracy, their new weapons and enhanced shields making them a formidable force. But the Zorathians retaliated with a ferocity that could only come from desperation. Their fleet was relentless, every ship moving as one giant organism focused on destroying humanity's forces. The battlefield was chaotic, every move was crucial, every second counted. Reyna's eyes darted across the tactical screens as she guided her fleet through the maelstrom of battle. The human ships darted in and out of the enemy lines, striking fast, and then disappearing into the chaos, only to reappear moments later for another strike. They had the element of surprise on their side, and they used it to full advantage. But the Zorathians were learning. They adapted quickly. Their ships began to concentrate fire on the human fleet's weaker points, targeting their vulnerable spots with deadly accuracy. Reyna could feel the strain on her fleet as they took hits and sustained damage, but they kept fighting, pushing forward as if there was no other option: victory or death. The human resolve was unwavering. Suddenly, a new wave of Zorathian ships appeared on the horizon, larger and more menacing than anything the humans had faced before. It was clear the Zorathians were throwing everything into this final assault. They had no choice but to win or face total annihilation. The new enemy ships moved in formation, ready to unleash their devastating firepower. Reyna knew this was the turning point. If they did not act fast, the human fleet would be overrun. She ordered a full retreat, but not for the entire fleet, only for a small portion of it. The rest of her forces would engage the Zorathian ships head-on while the rest of their forces moved to flank the enemy from the other side. It was a dangerous maneuver, but Reyna had no other choice. They needed to split the Zorathians' attention if they were to have a chance at victory. The battle turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse, the humans engaging in hit-and-run tactics with surgical precision, while the Zorathians scrambled to counter the unpredictable moves. They never expected the humans to use such guerrilla tactics, but it was working. The human fleet was wearing down the Zorathian forces with every strike, while minimizing their own losses. The human ships were swift and strategic, attacking with precision and disappearing into the shadows before the Zorathians could retaliate.